Hello there and welcome to another Coffee with Colm, and thanks very much for tuning in. If this is your first time joining me for a Coffee with Colm, you're very welcome. The objective behind this series of Coffees with Colm is where I take elements from my book Feeding Johnny, How to Build a Business Despite the Roadblocks, and then reflect on a snippet each week over a cup of coffee for 5 minutes or so, and share the snippet and share the lessons contained therein, in the hopes that by me sharing my lessons out there on the World Wide Web, it'll afford you a shortcut perhaps where back in the day I had none. If this is your first time joining me for a Coffee with Colm, you're very welcome. If you've stumbled across it and you're not already on our database, well then pop over to our homepage, colmobryanmotivation.com, and leave us your details and we'll send you this type of stuff on a weekly basis. If you think somebody else might benefit, well then please feel free to share it out privately or publicly. We'd love to spread the word. Thank you for that. Okay. This week I want to talk to you about the 4 players in the world of business. I came across this concept many years ago when I read a book called The Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki. And in it, Kiyosaki explains about the 4 players. There are employees and self-employed, and business owners and investors. When I started studying this stuff all those years ago, I was an employee. And the reason I was an employee all those years ago was because my dad was an employee and his dad was an employee. And so that's what I knew how to do. But I always wondered why some people got ahead and other people didn't, and I began to study this stuff and came across a book called The Cash Flow Quadrant, which I devoured, and it was probably the most influential book in terms of my own business journey, and I'd like to share with you some of the concepts that I came across then. In his book, Kiyosaki talks about the 4 players: employees, self-employed, business owners and investors, and he shows them represented thus in 4 different quadrants: top left, employee; bottom left, self-employed; top right, business owner; and bottom right, investor. Now there are 4 different types of individual. They're not mutually exclusive in that you and I can operate in one or more of the quadrants at any given time. So for example, I could be an employee of the Carambola Limited. At the same time I could be dabbling in stocks and shares as an investor. I could be an employee of the Carambola Limited and at the same time dabbling in stocks and shares, and perhaps have a rental property or 2. I could be an employee of the Carambola Limited, be dabbling in stocks and shares, have a rental property or 2, and at the same time be self-employed as a DJ, for example, at weekends. I'm not, but I could be. Anyway, the 4 players are completely different, but it's the difference between the 2 sides of the quadrant that I found most interesting. On the left-hand side, we trade our time for money. On the right-hand side, business owners and investors have learned how to leverage time and money, and that's the crucial difference. On the left-hand side, we trade our time, and on the right-hand side, we leverage our time. And what I decided to do was to study this phenomenon. And what I learned was that an employee will work for an hour and get paid for an hour. Doesn't work for an hour, doesn't get paid for an hour. The self-employed individual, by way of example, let's talk about a window cleaner. Window cleaner will go wash windows and do the job and get paid for the job. But if the self-employed individual, if the window cleaner can't wash windows, he or she doesn't get paid. If he or she's on holiday, doesn't get paid. If he or she falls off the ladder and breaks her leg and can't wash windows, doesn't get paid. On the right-hand side of the quadrant, by way of contrast, if we look at the business quadrant, we might have the likes of Michael O'Leary or Richard Branson. Now here's a question for you. Is it a fair assumption that whether Michael O'Leary or Richard Branson get up and go to the office today or not, they get paid? Fair assumption. Of course it is. And why do they get paid, whether they go to the office or not? Because they spent time, they invested time in learning how to build business systems that continue to operate whether they are there or not, whether they choose to go to the office or not. If we move to the bottom right-hand side of the quadrant, we've got the likes of Warren Buffett, one of the Western world's most prolific investors, and currently the world's 3rd wealthiest man. And the reason he's the world's 3rd wealthiest man is because many years ago Warren Buffett bought a business, he bought a company, and he took the profits from that company, he bought another company. He took the profits from that company, he bought another company, took the profits and bought another company, took the profits and bought another company, and took the profits and bought another company. And simply continued to do that. Now that, my friend, is huge leverage. And that's why Warren Buffett, given that he's got the same 24 hours in the day that you and I have, he is the world's 3rd wealthiest man, and I suggest that I'm not, nor are you, or you wouldn't be listening to this. Anyway, they're the 4 players in the world of business, and over the years I've learned to ask myself, which quadrant did I want to operate from? Now there's nothing wrong with any of the 4 quadrants. You've got to decide where you are, and more importantly, you've got to decide where you want to be. So I decided many years ago that I wanted to learn to become a business owner, and this is the path that I've been on ever since. I became self-employed when I took on the Bewley's Cafe franchise in Limerick, and I began to learn the lessons to graduate me across to the right-hand side where I learned to become a business owner, and this is where I want to spend my dotage, in business for myself and working with other business owners to help them build their business. And fundamentally this is what I do, is I help people transition from whichever quadrant they're in to the quadrant that they would like to be in. Thank you for joining me for this particular Coffee with Colm, and I hope you got something from it. What I'd ask that you do is consider what's been shared here today and apply it into your thinking for the next week or so. Feel free to pass the link on if you think somebody else would benefit. If you're not already on our database, go to colmobrianmotivation.com, leave us your details there, and we'll send you this type of stuff on a weekly basis. And then most importantly, come back next week and join me for another Coffee with Colm. We'll take another snippet from the book, and we'll share some good coffee together and perhaps learn something together. Take care. Delicious. Talk to you soon. Have a great week. Bye.